Tyrion opened his eyes to the sound of the company alarm in his bedroom, waking up to see the picture of his family that he kept with him while he was living in his facility. Sometimes the sight of his daughter smiling was all he needed to keep him motivated in a place like this. He sluggishly rolled over, got out of bed, and looked at the calendar once more to track his progress. The duality of the picture and the calendar brought a sort of order to his life. The picture allowed him to remember his sense of purpose, and the calendar allowed him to move forward in his duties, and was useful for keeping in touch with the outside world. So useful, in fact, was the calendar that without it he probably wouldn't even know what season it was. Tyrion looked at his desk to find his daily task presented to him in the form of a paper, which simply said, "Dissection today, Room 27V, urgent and necessary." Tyrion had little notion what was meant by dissection. He had little experience with dissection of any sort. Could mean a new area of work for him, possibly even a promotion. He did, however, know what urgent and necessary meant. It was a finely irrelevant name for a threat. There would be no room for mistakes or disappointments. He made his way to the elevator and input the instructed floor. Down he went through the dead space of his facility, while the floor number on his elevator continued to display a 0. But after a few minutes, the floor numbers began to count up. 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way up until 27. At last he entered room V and found his boss sitting on a chair in the corner, while the center of the room held a table with a tarp over it, and a stand with operating tools next to the table.
"Welcome, Tyrion,"
the boss said.
"I summoned you here today because I think you might be ready for a promotion. How would you like to be one of our head researchers?" "That would be wonderful. You know how much I appreciate the work I do here." "I do, and I am so glad you will be able to join me in our most lofty endeavors. But first, there is a bit of business we must deal with before your promotion."
As he said this, he walked to the center of the room and lifted the tarp that was on the table to reveal a living man in a state of panic. The man's hands and feet were restrained, and there was a muzzle-like device around his mouth to prevent him from talking for the moment. His eyes, however, freely darted back and forth between Tyrion and the boss, clearly in a state of both confusion and distress. It seems he knew what was about to happen just as well as everyone else.
"I see now why you called me for such a dissection. Practice hands are needed for this sort of operation."
Tyrion tried to remain as calm and collected as possible.
"What am I doing?"
he thought as he felt himself begin to sweat.
"Is he actually going to make me do what I think he is? So, how do you need me to operate?" "I want you to perform a dissection on this man. Though, for the operation to work, he must be kept alive for as long as possible. I'm sure you understand the necessity of this type of operation, given your other work."
Tyrion paused to collect himself and confront himself with what he was about to do.
Just think of Elizabeth. Yes, such an operation would be very, very useful. I will do what you ask. Excellent. I have only one more request. Remove the muzzle from around his mouth for a moment. Okay, very well.
As he removed the muzzle, the man began to cry for help, and his struggle became ever more vigorous.
Please don't do this. Please do not kill me."
Admittedly, being confronted with a man pleading for his life was almost enough to strike Tyrion's conscience. But the boss was watching.
I'm sorry, that is simply something I cannot do."
Tyrion's answer did not seem to give the man very much comfort.
"All right, he had his chance,"
the boss said in a bored, eye-rolling manner.
"That was even less of an effort than the last one. Put the muzzle back on and begin your work."
Tyrion didn't know what was meant by the last one, but at this point it seemed better just to get this over with. He reattached the muzzle, saying,
"There's nothing I can do, but don't worry. I will make sure you are put to good use when this is all over."
The boss seemed to approve of that line, but the patient's eyes grew wide, and he immediately said,
Wait, stop. You and I are in the same
But before he could finish, Tyrion finished putting the muzzle around his mouth.
"Come now. The fact that we are both human does not mean you cannot serve a greater good by my hand.
And then Tyrion began his work. Sometime later, Tyrion opened his eyes to the sound of the company alarm in his bedroom, slightly more tired than he normally was. The date on the calendar said March 25th, 2005. He still enjoyed checking the calendar, as it really helped him track his progress. He was only a few days away from his 3-year anniversary with the company, though he admitted it felt much longer than that. As always, the picture of his family stood on the dresser across from his bed, though a little dustier than it once had been. The boss told him he was once more approaching a promotion with his work, though he had little idea of what that entailed. Nevertheless, he felt that he was finally getting somewhere with the company, as though the very reason for his work was reaching its fulfillment. Ever since Tyrion got his first promotion, he had had access to a full bathroom before and after his hours. They even installed a new one in his room a few months in. Despite the improved living conditions, he saw himself getting thinner and thinner with each passing day as he continued to dedicate himself more fully to his work. He liked that, though. It felt as though he was finally moving up in the world, like he was truly becoming somebody. And maybe someday he would even be able to see his wife and daughter again. But there was no time for that now. He would have work to do. He looked into his mirror for a moment and saw that his face was still getting thinner, and it was about time for him to shave again.
I'll do that tonight,
he thought to himself. He then quickly got dressed and walked over to his desk to find a piece of paper saying, "Dissection this morning, room 13G. Your last promotion will be given to you afterwards. Come as soon as possible."
Well, that's a surprise. I had no idea I'd already climbed to the highest ranks of the company. Guess I'll have to find out later what that means. Oh well, for now I guess I'll just do this dissection.
Tyrion went to the elevator, barely noticing that no one else was in the hallway until he found it. After waiting a few moments, the doors promptly opened to him, and he selected floor 13. After waiting through the minutes of dead space, the doors once more opened, and Tyrion found himself in a barely lit hallway, where only the janitor could be found. Tyrion decided not to bother him and instead moved towards the operating room, finding that it too was poorly lit for some reason. The senior hygiene manager was in attendance to this operation as well.
"Good morning, Tyrion," he said. "I was sent by the boss to warn you that this person you are dissecting today is highly contagious. Have you been vaccinated against everything recently?" "Why, no, I didn't know anything about this." "That's fine. However, I will need for you to take one of these pills, yes. These should immunize you for the duration of the operation. Good luck, and also congratulations."
And then he left the room after handing Tyrion one of the pills.
Why, thank you very much. I will see you soon."
After this, Tyrion walked into the room to find a woman as his next patient. He quickly began his work which had become routine over the past 2 years. So in the meantime, he began imagining what new subjects would be introduced to him after his promotion. His dream, of course, was to move on to the council of the company. That way, he could at last be the one making decisions. Until then, though, it was perhaps wise not to hope for too much. So he finished his work, marked down the needed notes, and headed back towards his room. On his way there, he encountered his boss.
"Oh, Tyrion, I'm so glad I happened to pass you by. Here's your key card. I meant to give it to you earlier. With your promotion, you'll have free reign of this facility, and I, for one, am most eager to see how well you utilize it. I'll see you tonight." Well, okay, thank you, sir,"
Tyrion said, though by the time he had spoken, the boss had already moved on to his next arrangement, and Tyrion was left to wander in the hallway. He had such little understanding of what he should do with this so-called free reign of his. Throughout his career, he had been given a rather strict schedule, and suddenly losing that was daunting, to such a point that he was even paralyzed by his indecision. He was moving back to his room when he realized just how dull and vacant the facility truly was, when suddenly he felt an immense amount of pain, crushing, Horrifying pain surged throughout his body until eventually he collapsed and began to vomit. Nevertheless, the sudden aches remained, and after a few moments of confused shock, he realized he needed a doctor. He got up and immediately rushed to the medical wing of the facility. Coming there, he found his friend Aiden and said,
Aiden, I need your help.
The doctor, shocked by Tyrion's sudden appearance, quickly ran over to help him into a chair.
What happened? I don't know. I was walking back to my room when suddenly my whole body convulsed and ached with enormous pain and...
Tyrion's body began to convulse again, and he passed out as he collapsed onto the floor.
I'll get you onto a stretcher. We'll need to operate quickly.
Tyrion seemed to be unconscious for only a few moments. They had just laid him on the stretcher, and they were bringing him into the operating room. Aiden then noticed that Tyrion was awake and said,
I'm sorry, but none of us have the skill for this. I'll go get one of the more experienced doctors, and they'll be with you shortly, I'm sure.
Within mere moments, another man came into the room to examine him, far too quickly to have been someone called by Aiden. While thinking of this, Tyrion then realized he did not recognize this man at all.
So, who are you?
He asked, trying his hardest not to sound impolite.
I'm the senior medical councilman. I met you earlier today, do you not remember? Oh, yes, now I remember,
Tyrion lied, looking down at his name tag, which said, Dr. Arius S. Galen.
Now, I've come to help you, but before I can offer you any treatment, I'd like to ask you a few questions. First, what sort of pain did you feel?
Tyrion decided to go along with it for the moment. He thought back to when he was walking towards his bedroom.
I would describe it as a sudden and simultaneous headache and stomachache, both of which immediately became more and more crushing and overwhelming with each passing moment as it spread throughout my body. You say it was immediate. Did it ever die down? No, in fact. Actually, it's gone now. I just realized I don't feel pain anymore.
To this, the medical councilman smiled and said,
Excellent. I will be back with you in a moment to give you your medicine. Well, that was weird,
was all Tyrion could think. But soon Aiden came back into the room with an apologetic look on his face.
Say, Aiden, who was that man that you just sent in here? What? I wasn't able to find anyone who was awake yet. To be honest, you're lucky that I'm still awake, or else you would have been stuck outside in the hallway and died. I knew something was off here,
Tyrion thought.
I'm feeling completely fine again, and now there's something else I need to investigate,
he said as he got up and ran towards the door. He had to guess which way the other man went, so he chose left and sprinted around the twisted corners of the facility, using his new keycard when needed. Eventually, he admitted to himself that he was lost in some foreign place in the facility, and he still could not find this man. But he did stumble into the records office and realized he could search for the records of this Arius S. Galen. He could never find the man's name, but oddly enough, he was able to find his own name, Tyrion G. Warren, recently taken out of a file. It was labeled Experiment on the folder, and within it was found his entire history with the company, from his application through his promotions to this very day. Each day had the activities he was scheduled for down to the hour, and each day was filled with detailed descriptions of each event and operation, from him waking up, to eating food, to sleeping, every day except today, which bore only one word: dissection. Tyrion sat down, slowly realizing what was going on, and trying to figure out what he needed to do.
I need to get out. I need to get out now.
He got up and ran back out the door, re-entering the labyrinth of hallways that was the facility, desperately trying to find the elevator. It seemed days of wandering through increasingly dark and musty hallways before he came to a long hallway, with darkness stretching across the walls like long fingers. But at the end, he found a flight of stairs. The part of the facility he was in a terrible condition. Old and rotting, with barely any lights still working. The place was so foreign that Tyrion could not even recognize the numbers marking the doors. Tyrion began to run up the stairs. The stairs were so poorly lit that he was forced to use a flashlight just to see how far up each flight of stairs went. With each turn, he imagined he saw someone, or something in the shadows, and his heart jumped, thinking that he had at last been caught. But he persevered each time until at last he came to the end of the stairs, found the nearest exit, and escaped into the forest. All throughout the night Tyrion ran, breathing in the cold, clean air of the forest, with each blast of wind breathing new life into his clouded mind. Strangely, it was only now that he realized that it was nighttime, while his watch told him it was only a few minutes before noon. When he reached the end of the forest, he stopped to catch his breath and to think about what to do now that he was free. A wave of tedium as well as relief washed over him, and he began to laugh as he laid down onto the grass. The grass made him feel relaxed, even happy. It brought to his mind an image from so long ago, a little girl wrestling with him by a campfire, with the most beautiful woman in the world watching with glee. That's it. I can go home. I can see... What was her name? Elizabeth. Yes. I can see my daughter once again. The city where he lived was not too far from the facility, so he only had a short trip to make it back home. When he was back within the city limits, he found a ride and went to his house, all the while thinking himself lucky that they didn't erase that information from his head. By the time he found the house, the sun was finally rising. He eagerly rushed inside to find that the house was empty and the door unlocked. He wanted to look about the house for his wife and daughter, but recognized that he was far too tired for that, and instead walked over to lie on the couch. Perhaps they'll wake me up later, but it doesn't matter now. I'm finally home. As he fell onto the couch, he realized just how tired he was, and that all he wanted to do was sleep. He was so tired, in fact, that he didn't even acknowledge the broken state of his alleged house. When Tyrion awoke, he found himself laid on a stretcher, unbound for the moment, in a strange room with walls of gray concrete. Next to his stretcher was an array of operating tools, as well as what seemed to be a regular cutting knife. He was confused, but he sat up to look around the room. In the corner, he found the boss sitting in a chair, smiling at him. Well, well, you've finally woken up. What's going on? What happened? You know, for all the effort you put into escaping, you still made it too easy. You could have at least locked the door. Tyrion stared at him in disbelief, completely at a loss for words as he came to terms with what happened. It was only after some time that he finally collected himself enough to speak. So, what will you do now? Move forward with the procedure, of course. You are, after all, a 13-year investment. What do you mean a 13-year investment? I started working here no more than 3 years ago. Tyrion looked around the room as he spoke to confirm that there was no one else. He found the door and judged his distance from the operating tools and the knife. He could still find a way out, or at least do some damage as he left. Oh yes, I forgot. You've only been here for 3 years, of course. All you need to know is that your usefulness to us is about to dry up. It's quite the honor. You should be very proud for making it this far. What is wrong with you? So what? This company is just a means of leading people into a slaughter? Oh, come now. The boss began to stroke Tyrion's hair, something which caused chills to run up his spine. What objection could you possibly raise? You've personally killed dozens of men and even women for the pursuit of knowledge. I simply put more effort into my work. He was close, and Tyrion took the opportunity. He grabbed the knife nearby and plunged it into the boss's heart. Immediately, he jumped up and tried to run for the door, but found his arm forcefully grabbed. The boss promptly broke several of Tyrion's fingers on his left hand, as well as tore off the thumb of his right one, and he began tying Tyrion down onto a table. Tyrion confusedly looked at the knife wound while nursing his pain. There was blood rapidly spilling out and staining the coat, but seeming to have no other effect. What are you? I like your fight. It's what makes you a good candidate, but you should stop now. Without us, you have nothing left to fight for. That was all it took to make Tyrion extremely indignant. My fight has always been to see my daughter again. I have never fought for you. ago. The boss applied a muzzle while he said this. He snapped his fingers and suddenly Tyrion lay docile on the table, staring blankly at the wall as the veil over his memory and sight was finally lifted, and he remembered fully how much he gave up for nothing. The boss placed a tarp over him, and then he sat down in a corner and waited. After a few minutes of waiting, another man came into the room.
Well, Dominic, I summoned you here today because I think you might be ready for a promotion. How would you like to be one of our head researchers?
That would be wonderful, Dominic exclaimed. I am always one for moving up in the world. You know that more than most.
I do, and I'm so glad you'll be able to join me. But first, there is a bit of business that we must deal with before your promotion.
At that moment, the top was taken off Tyrion's body, and he got a good look at this Dominic. He seemed to be a rather normal-looking man, perhaps slightly rougher than Tyrion. His eyes were dark gray, as was his hair.
This is the dissection of which you were informed. You may begin when ready. I only have one request, though. Remove the muzzle from around his mouth for a moment.
Very well. As he removed the muzzle, Tyrion let out the cry of pain that he had been harboring.
Wait. This man is a murderer.
How rude, Dominic said.
Trying to save yourself by discrediting my wonderful manager. No wonder you've been selected.
Whether there was a hint of fear behind his expression, Tyrion couldn't tell.
All right, he had his chance. I suppose that was something.
Dominic was about to reapply the muzzle when he said,
Look, if it will make you feel better, I will make sure to put you to good use when this is all over.
Tyrion stopped struggling. He remembered those words and thought to himself, those were my words when I was in your place. He closed his eyes. We are the same, he said, echoing his first patient's last words in a dreamy expression. As Dominic reattached the muzzle around his mouth, Tyrion became limp and resigned his spirit, perhaps cursing or perhaps praying for the man who was about to kill him.
We may be fundamentally the same, but let's be honest, we are in two very different circumstances.
And with that, Dominic began his work.